Sam is a young woman in New York City who has familial dysautonomia, FD for short.
Hello, my dear. Aren't you looking beautiful? This is Kaylee. She's helping out Elena, who I know you remember.
Now it's a quiz. I mean, that's named.
Yeah.
FD is a rare genetic disorder that severely decreases the functioning of the autonomic nervous system. What does this mean for Sam? Well, a lot of things.
Part of my routine every single day of my life. I can only eat my mouth once or twice a week. Very carefully, I have to cough 2 or 3 times, swallow, and make sure I haven't aspirated anything or I can get pneumonia. So whenever I eat, I have to cough, swallow, make sure everything's okay.
One of the difficult things to manage among the many things that are difficult is that people have extremely irregular blood pressure, right, Sam?
Yeah, very, very.
Yeah, so it can go very high and very low. Like within a half hour, it can be kind of like stroke level, and then it can be like 60/40, and she's on the floor. Okay, we're just doing Sam hack here. So her heart rate's at 143 beats a minute. Okay, thank you.
Ataxia, or lack of coordination, is also a feature of the disease.
She was not able to sit independently. She was not able to cross. She was not able to stand independently. She was not able to walk. Our goal at the time is really to get her to walk independently.
Sam has accomplished a lot. Since she was a young girl, she has been an activist for public awareness about FD, appearing on Nick News, CNN, and becoming an ambassador for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. She was an original member of the Fearless Theater Company, which is made up of young people with and without disabilities.
Be sure to come back soon to the Music Time Cafe.
We'll find out more about Sandy.
We'll enjoy a new song by the Holiday Sisters.
And we'll meet amazing guest artists.
We'll work on some brand new music with Benny.
And we'll find out what Lugano puts on the menu next.
So long! Come back soon!
She has a close circle of family, friends, and caregivers who we will also get to know.
I feel me best for a very long time.
Yeah.
Throughout our production, we interviewed Sam and her friends and family here in the studio and followed her as she lived her daily life at home and in other locations.
All right, let's start with our ho, ho, ho.
This season will give you a comprehensive look at life with familial dysautonomia and the challenges facing Sam and others with FD. This series aims to explore the enormous potential for using video as a tool to enhance research, make connections, and improve the lives of people with rare diseases. In this episode, we talked to Sam and her mother Faye about the long, expensive, and emotionally trying road to diagnosis. Because these disorders are rare, most doctors see few, if any, children with a particular disorder. Faye had to take on the role of detective to solve the mystery of her daughter's condition. We'll also hear from Dr. Horacio Kaufman from New York University's Langone Medical Center about the discovery of familial dysautonomia and its complex array of symptoms.
When Samantha was born, I had a very normal, healthy, easy pregnancy. She had what was called an APGAR score of 9. So APGAR is a rating they do of newborns to assess if they seem developmentally on track at that moment. And so a 9 is an excellent score. So we had absolutely no idea that there might be any issues. And she was a very cute baby. Do you agree?
Yeah.
We decided that she was cute enough to take home.
The disease is expressed at birth, meaning is a developmental defect, and symptoms occur right from the beginning. The common symptoms are difficulty feeding. These kids have a lot of problem latching and breastfeeding, and one of the most dramatic manifestations is that they aspirate, meaning even when they can feed or they can take milk, the milk goes to the wrong pipe, and instead of going to the stomach, it goes to the lungs, and they have recurrent aspiration pneumonias. That's usually the first sign that something is wrong.
So within about the first 2 weeks of Sam being born, she was having a lot of trouble breastfeeding, and she lost a lot of weight right away. So we went into the doctor and asked what's going on, and they didn't pick up anything, but they did send us to a breastfeeding clinic, and Samantha wasn't able to suck properly. That's actually a feature of FD, is not being, so because it's all your autonomic functions, which are your involuntary functions, so sucking is one of them. So they we weren't able to get enough food into Sam, so they put in what's called a G-tube right away without having any diagnosis, and that allowed Sam to get enough fluid. So in this picture, you see she's starting to gain weight. She looks like a chubby baby, which she wasn't until then. So there's a big story behind this cute chubby baby, because she was not a chubby baby for quite a while. And we went through a lot of misdiagnoses. We were sent to this specialist and that specialist, and
So, how long, I mean, you talked about there were quite a few people you mentioned in terms of the diagnosis. How long was that? Was it a year or was it?
no, I can tell you exactly. It was a little over 5 months. And this woman who runs a genetic center picked up that Samantha had a twist in her colon, which was completely random. And so we thought maybe that she was having a lot of retching and projectile vomiting, and which also could be typical of FD for completely different reasons. So she picked up this kink in her colon. Her husband happened to be the head pediatric surgeon. He did the surgery on Samantha. And so we were very excited. We thought we had solved the problem. And then they kind of threw us in the back of the ward and didn't want to pay attention to us. And I kept coming out and saying, something's still not right.
Do you want to bring her through? Yeah. We'll get you. Yeah, I can. Are you going to hang out with Danny? You've got to play with as well.
Hi, Luis. Nice to have you here visiting the center. My name is Horacio Kaufman. I'm a neurologist. At the Dysautonomia Center, we treat patients that have abnormalities of the autonomic nervous system.
Actually, with this arm.
So what is the autonomic nervous system? Is the part of the brain that controls all the functions in the body that are involuntary, meaning your heart, sweating, the size of the pupil, the gut, the bladder, everything that is not directly controlled by will. as opposed to the other part of the nervous system that controls movements that are voluntary. So the autonomic, the name comes from autonomous or independent, and it controls everything that's independent of will.
And then finally, actually, I asked everyone I knew, I said, do you know someone who's a really great diagnostician? Which is a really unusual, it's not a specialty that people go into, but it's just something that some doctors really have a kind of talent for. And they sent me to a young woman who was just barely a little bit older than I was, and she sat us down, and she was the only doctor who asked about our ethnic background, so because my husband and I are Jewish, and she then used a safety pin, a reflex hammer, what's called a flare test, which is a very simple thing that people do for certain kind of histamine reactions, but you can administer in any doctor's office. A magnifying glass to look at her tongue, and she used the backside of a safety pin to check her corneal reflex. And those are 6 features that tell you a person is very likely to have FD. The last thing you can do is a blood test. In 20 minutes, she had asked our ethnic background. She saw that Sam had no corneal reflex, which means like if someone touches your eye, you don't blink, basically. That's how you can tell. Has no reflex, so usually most people with a reflex hammer go like that, and Sam doesn't. Or people with FD don't do that. And what were the other? The tongue is missing a couple of the papillae that are part of the taste, the way you taste things. And so that was the magnifying glass. So yeah, so with really, after we had been subjected to unbelievable numbers of expensive tests, and I knew she was right, because first she called in 3 medical residents to look at Sam. So because when you have a very rare disorder or disease, you really want as many clinical people to see it, especially people who are in training. So I thought very responsible of her. And then she called the one specialist in the world who happens to be at NYU Langone Medical Center, wonderful doctor named Dr. Axelrod. She started getting her on the right track.
Now, familial dysautonomia is also called Riley-Day syndrome. It was first described by 2 pediatricians in New York in 1949. Now, they saw 5 patients, all babies or young children from Hasidic families, from the Jewish community in New York. And they realized that although they were all from different families, there were 5 kids, they share a number of features that suggested that they all had a similar disorder. And of course, because they all came from an ethnic group, he thought that probably this was genetic. And he called it familial dysautonomia. The initial description is really so illustrative. I mean, he says that these kids did not cry when their feet were put in cold water, so he realized that they were not feeling temperature, and also that when they became anxious or upset, they would vomit. So, and at the same time, he realized that they did not feel not only temperature, but they did not feel pain either. And one of the dramatic manifestations was that their blood pressure and their heart rate would swing widely. So when they were excited, or either because they were upset or very happy, they would have the same response. Their blood pressure would go sky high, their heart rate would also go sky high, and their skin would blotch, would get red. So he realized that it was the autonomic nervous system what was amiss in these patients. Many years later, the gene responsible for the disease was discovered by Sue Slagerhaupt in Harvard, working together with people here at the center that provided, of course, all the samples.
But I just wanted to remind you as we head into this discussion what the DNA mutation that causes FD does. And it disrupts something called RNA splicing. And so
what I didn't tell you was, of course, that the disease is autosomal recessive. What does that mean? It means that you require 2 copies of the gene to have the disease. So the parents are both, or both have to be carriers, meaning they have 1 copy of the gene. Now, they have no symptoms, and they are unaware of being the carriers. So they have 1 in 4 the possibility of having an affected child if the offspring, if the baby has 2 copies of that gene.
Almost everyone who's been diagnosed, with the exception of 4 people, knows that they come from Ashkenazi Jewish families. We have a few cases that have turned up in Mexico in an area, they're all in the same area, and the mutation's exactly the same. So it raises very interesting questions about whether, because Jews have fled persecution and prejudice over so many centuries, and so the genes are all over the place, even though some people then also abandon their identity. So we have people who probably have those genes who don't have any idea that their families are Jewish.
It's important to realize, and both Riley and they commented on that although the name of the disease refers to the autonomic abnormality, this is much more than just an autonomic nervous system problem. They also have problems with their spine. One of the most disabling problems is that the spine twists, and they have something called scoliosis, with a progressive deformity of the spine that also results in quite a bit of problems, because that affects the lung, not just the aesthetics, but it affects the lungs and also the ability to keep balance.
Arms out in front of you. Now close your eyes. I'm right here. Hold, stay
Which, of course, is a big problem because ataxia, or lack of coordination, is also a feature of the disease. Now, that feature, that ataxia, is what's called a sensory ataxia. So normally we have sensors in the muscles that tell the brain where each limb is, even if you're not looking at it. So you can close your eyes, you can move your arms on your legs, and you know perfectly where your arms or your legs are. These people don't know that. So you can, if you tell them to close their eyes and you move a leg or an arm up or down, they may be unaware of where the limb is.
Let's try this hand. Okay. This is up and this is down, okay?
Okay.
So tell me, up or down? Good. How about now?
Down.
Up or down?
Up.
Okay. How about now?
Up.
Up or down?
Up.
Okay. So now tell me, this is up
Up.
and this is down, okay? So tell me, up or down?
Up. Down.
Wait. How about now?
And up.
Okay. I'll ask you. Now up or down?
Up.
Up or down?
Up.
Now, this is not just a rarity. This results in big problems because it produces lack of coordination, and their balance gets quite impaired, and progressively they have more and more difficulty walking, to the point that in their 20s and sometimes earlier, most patients require a walking aid of some type. As if this would not be enough, they also have a progressive deterioration of the optic nerves. The retina, which is the front part of the optic nerve, is a part of the brain that comes out, is through which we see, gets progressively thinner and degenerate to the point that all patients progressively lose vision, and there are a number of them that in their 40s become legally blind with marked reduction in their ability to see.
What number's just that one?
2.
This one?
2.
And this one?
1.
This will be, of course, a big problem for anybody. For them, it's even worse. Why? So when you have sensory ataxia, remember I mentioned that if you move your limbs, unless you are looking at them, you do not know where the limbs are in space. So it's the same for walking. When they depend on vision. So vision is what enables them to walk and correct some of those what's called proprioceptive defects, the ones that come from the sensory problem. So when vision deteriorates, their ability to walk deteriorates dramatically, and many times appears to be almost acute, because they can have, let's say, an ulceration of the cornea, another problem that occurs frequently because the lack of sensation. You see, normally, if you get even a little grain of sand in your eye, you quickly realize, you close your eyes, you start tearing, and the drop of sand or grain of sand comes out. Well, they don't feel it. You can touch their cornea, and many times they don't feel anything. You know, the cornea is the lens of the eye, the front part of the eye. So even being outside in a windy day can produce an ulcer. That ulcer can result in a scar and then cataracts, and that also decreases or can impair vision. So it's crucial to protect that.
So since people with FD don't produce tears, my aunt gave me this ring for my birthday. It's called the teardrop ring from Pandora, which is one of my favorite jewelry stores. And the reason I got it is because it has a tear, and since I cannot produce tears, I just thought it's pretty cool.
She wears special lenses that have made a huge difference.
Not just me, but a lot of people.
Most people with FD now are wearing these lenses, and they hold saline on the eye. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so we do this, but unfortunately, they do look great, except her left eye, her cornea got damaged. We weren't able to get the lenses in time to prevent corneal damage on the left eye.
I see.
We're going to keep doing all the cutting-edge genetic research, but actually somebody invented these, they're like huge contact lenses that kind of bulge out, and so there are lots of people with dry eye issues, including our population. So, right, so those, since we've started using those, and I think you always seem to be able to see better when you have those lenses because the tears actually help the vision.
If we really understood rare diseases like FD and people were making technology like these lenses, then it starts expanding and it helps a lot of people with dry eye, which is just what, and that's part of the beauty of doing this documentation and getting all this detail.